So, hello everyone. This is Bob Coppage, CEO Simplex-IT, crotchety old geek, whatever, with another episode of BizTech Twist, and I have my first second-time guest here.
Nice.
I know. Howard Pincham. Give me some history.
Crotchety old geek meets younger crotchety old geek. How about that?
You are the least crotchety person I know.
Dude, you should see me in the morning, and it's like, get off my grass, deer and animals and all this other stuff. Yeah, it's just I'm getting old, dude. I'm getting old. My daughter says I'm old. I look old. I don't have any hair. Yeah, it's just, I'm older than people I thought were old when I was hanging out with you.
There is that, isn't there?
Yes, it is.
There's that whole, and my favorite statement is when Mozart was my age, he'd been dead for 30 years.
That's profound, dude.
Absolutely. And you also get to that point where when you look at it from a technology standpoint.
Yeah.
Because I remember when I was just getting through high school, and I actually worked on my first computer, which had 8K of RAM, but it wasn't RAM, and it was paper tape filled. There was or loaded. It had no hard drive, no floppy drive, no nothing. It was all teletype, blah, blah, blah. And I have lived through all the technological changes.
Wow.
Now you take a look at, because I have grandchildren that age, and you take a look at the technology they're dealing with now, what will they see when, that 40 years from now?
Yeah.
And that's one of the challenging things. But you and I have known each other for a quarter of a century at least. If not
I
that.
think a little longer. I hit town in 87.
Okay.
And, little IT guy working in a computer center, my first real job out of school. And man, it was just all the things. And somebody said, you're going to have to learn this stuff. Get with this community. There's this guy named Coppage. He has all this stuff, and they have community, and they're teaching about PCs and databases that run on PCs and other things. Go check those guys out. You need friends.
Okay, I don't know about the friend part, because that just took it that one step further. But that's interesting, because back in the 80s, there was no internet.
No.
So there was no go Google it or go Yahoo it or Bing it or anything along those lines. And it was really hard because we didn't have a whole heck of a lot of standards, and a lot of things were being invented, so on and so forth, as a lot of stuff still is today.
Right on.
But based on the backbone of everything else that's been developed over the last 30 or 40 years. But there was a community.
Yeah, community.
And that community was actually worldwide.
Yes.
But there was a volunteer model called the user group model. And that's kind of what you're talking about.
Yes.
And the neat thing is you say people told you to check me out.
Yeah.
But that was really not the idea. The idea was you checked the organization out. And that way I became a little more tolerable. Coppage is that, but there's other people and they're cool.
Well, you got to admit, you're the face guy, right? You're the person that brought all this together. You had the vision to even get all this together. And hey, give yourself a little credit. You brought some legitimacy there.
Absolutely. But actually, I'll give Dan Hansen, who was the president before me.
Okay.
And he actually was, but that was the cool thing, is it wasn't one person. It was a whole bunch. But the bottom line, and by the way, a majority of people who are watching or listening to this podcast do not see this face.
Good thing.
So
good thing.
Yeah, it is a good thing, because then they're thinking I am handsome or something based on your comments. Whereas those who are watching on YouTube are like, what is he talking about? Those glasses are out of date.
Well, I'll just leave that to the universe and all this stuff out there.
But the interesting thing was that there was it started with Boston Computer Society, and the group in particular you're talking about is the Greater Cleveland PC Users Group.
Yes.
Which I was involved with for about 20 years or so. And it was a volunteer organization who made use of both local individuals and organizations and then national vendors, with the whole idea of let's all figure this out together. It was usually all volunteers. It was usually all let's share our knowledge and share our information in a very positive way.
Very positive.
And Greater Cleveland throughout the 90s, I think at the largest point we had about 1,200 members, and we did about 40 meetings each month.
Easy.
And it was easy because
Across the spectrum,
every one of those meetings was run by a different person.
Absolutely.
And you could have ones that were talking about beginners. You could have stuff that we had a SQL group, which we'll talk about in a bit. We had developers. We had network, internet, because it was a fad, of course.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But, we had
basic networking. Yeah.
Yeah, and they would just meet on a monthly basis. And the nice thing was that at that particular time, the group was it was a $25 a month. $25 a year dues, but it was voluntary. You could still go to any meeting you wanted to, or all the meetings. And our monthly gathering, which was down at Cleveland State, who donated the space to us, we would have anywhere from 300 to 500 people attending, because we were the source.
You were the source, absolutely. And we needed that sharing model, that exchange model, because we were all hobbyists, right? Until the mid 90s, late 90s. Who wanted a computer in their home? Play Zork, something crazy like that? Maybe print out a resume on dot matrix paper, right? What are you going to do with that?
But I would say even those of us who were doing it for a living were still hobbyists to a certain degree.
I would agree.
As you compare it to today, all of the rigor, especially from a security standpoint, or even if you compared it to, because this was specifically something that was primarily aimed at the PC level.
Yes.
So you had the mainframers out there, which I almost feel like, this is like The Walking Dead or something like that. The mainframers out there. You had the people who were in a traditional IBM shack, doing, the
large
things with
system stuff. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There was a formality, a rigor to
Very
it.
much.
They had to do it in a certain way because they were very limited.
Yes.
Whereas us,
roll it in, turn it on.
Absolutely.
Reboot it, just cycle that power again. Yeah. That's all you needed. Yeah.
It compiled clean, ship it.
There you go.
We're good.
Hey, I was a large system guy. I thought it was just all the thing. Here, these guys come with PCs. It's like, what do you want something like that for? It's like, you can't calculate payroll or anything like that. Play a game. But goodness gracious.
Well, and because actually my first job in IT. My first job was actually with a company called Ohio Scientific Instruments, and this would have been back in 1977. They were, this was before, yes, I am old. Thank you. We're going to bring that up again.
No, because, you are old, because I don't think, I was still in junior high school.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
So, but they were actually in Hiram, Ohio, and they were, I think at that time, the third largest manufacturer of single board computers.
Really?
Yeah, and
nationwide.
Actually, could be even worldwide. Now, there wasn't much competition. But they came up with computers that had 4K of RAM, a cassette tape to store data. So no floppy, no nothing. So you had to load. And we were asked to write, and I was a programmer for them.
Okay.
We were asked to write payroll systems using 4K of RAM, basic language only, and truly, MS Basic, or actually it was prior to Microsoft even. We were asked to do that. But we had to just figure out how to make this work. And the like. And it was an interesting world, and there was no real quality control or anything along those lines. But that kept happening, and there was no IBM PC standard. So you had manufacturers such as Apple with the Apple II, XD with the XD Sorcerer, the Atari 400, the Commodores, the TRS-80s, the so on and so forth. And every one of them had different nuances. Every one of them had different ways of doing things.
Yes. And
at that time, and much more so even once the PC started happening, there was no standard. Or worse, there were plenty of them.
Plenty. You're right. I'm thinking for video, for storage, for all this stuff. Yeah. Forget this. This hard drive doesn't work in this device. Oh well, call the manufacturer. See
Absolutely.
What you get.
Yeah. And the challenge that was happening was that you had a couple of magazines like Kilobyte, Creative Computing, was a couple Byte magazine, PC magazine, all of those.
Computer World was coming around back then. Yeah.
I think that was just starting to, but those guys were coming out, but they were sales articles. They were selling their pieces, parts as time went on. But the user group kind of evolved, and again, Boston Computer Society, I think, was the first one, or the first wildly successful one, as a way to learn and a way to share our knowledge and the like, and to do so in a very, very effective and efficient way. And we would, and I've met Gates, I met Ballmer, I met Philippe Kahn, I met Gordon Eubanks from Symantec, all that. None of them would remember me in any way, shape, or form, except for Ballmer. Ballmer might remember me or his call to security. I actually, because I love jokes and I'm pretty good at when to draw the line as far as when something's funny and not. Yeah, that was one where I didn't do a good job.
You try to convince them maybe to use a Windows phone or something?
No. This was as actually part of a group of about a dozen or so user group leaders who were brought out to Redmond, I think in 98.
Okay.
Because Microsoft is having trouble getting people to upgrade to Windows 98, so they wanted to bring us together for a workforce to figure it out. And I won't go into the details, but I made a suggestion, because remember the start button?
Oh, yeah.
And it was the weird, you press the start button in order to shut it down.
There you go.
That kind of thing.
Go over it. Yeah.
And they were just getting into all the logoed materials. And I made a comment about the start button on briefs. Yeah. And it was one of those, yeah, exactly. And it was one of those where as soon as I said it, and I said it to Ballmer with this, hey, I'm saying something funny. You want to hear something funny? Because I'm funny. I was like, oh, yeah, I shouldn't have said that. And thankfully, he went on gracefully.
There you go.
But no, yeah. So
look at you. And you live to tell the story.
I did live to tell the story.
Is this why you told me to stand in line in front of Egghead Software like all night at midnight trying to get my copy of Windows 98?
No, that was just because I wanted to see if you would do it.
Yeah.
And you did.
Right on.
Yeah.
Sure did. It took my wife that time too, man. She's in line with
I have to apologize for her because I didn't intend to be there to be additional suckers who would do it.
It's like she won this and marriage and husband and follow this nerd guy. Yeah, come on, it's fun. Let's stand in line. It was summertime and everything.
But that was actually because there was so much going on from from the group and the interaction and the social. And let's face it, a lot of us don't have friends.
Not have friends. I told you that's 100% why. It's like I'm in Cleveland. Come out of Youngstown. I needed some friends. Needed some network. Why not? Some people that are going to turn into crotchety old geeks, right?
There you go.
Learn all the things, bring it back to work for those guys that tell me I'm out of my mind, and our little end user computing department, a handful of PCs and all that, and we could not see this. Well, we couldn't see where we are now, right?
Oh, absolutely.
We could not see this because we just need to run large machines and large systems forever.
Yeah.
And LPARs, reboots, all the things.
And it's interesting because then what ended up happening is the high point right around the turn of the century was that whole the internet now starts to happen. It is going on, and suddenly instead of, and you and I were talking about this before we started. Prior to then, the user groups were the candle in the darkness. It was a way to learn in a way that was honestly there just to share knowledge, to share experience,
right on.
All of that kind of fun stuff.
No obligations, loved it.
Exactly, and not a huge cost except for time.
Not at all. Not at all.
And that changed drastically, both in terms of all of a sudden these companies started springing up that were much more engaged in making money, which is understandable, but also the internet started presenting itself as having much more resources. And so suddenly we faced the user group community, who none of us were paid, was faced with all of this competition for what we were doing, and all of that competition was funded.
Oh, yes.
And so over the span of about the next 3 to 5 years, and starting with the Boston Computer Society, which started did that press release where they said, we're done. Where they basically said, we don't need to teach people about computers anymore because everybody knows everything, which was like, what? I know.
Close, yeah.
But then other user groups, including Greater Cleveland, just couldn't adapt and just had trouble. So now, flash forward to 2023, there isn't a really well-defined model, repeatable model in terms of how communities, other than online communities, and we'll get to that, but there's not a good model for local communities to keep doing what was happening 20, 30 years ago. And the sad part is that before it was that candle in the darkness, and that was needed and that was wonderful.
Very much.
Now it's the opposite. It's that voice of sanity amidst the cacophony of noise. Because there's so many things, and I'm talking about just learning how to use the technology. let alone from the security standpoint and everything else.
There you go. Yeah.
Now it's, how do you learn without being scammed? How do you find that source of truth? How do you find the things that are appropriate? Because not every aspect of IT is for everyone. And by the way, this is about end users. This is about hobbyists. This is about homeowners. This is about retirees. This is about kids. This is about everybody.
Everybody.
And is there a model of the user group concept that can be used today? And I'm trying to figure that out. And there are some examples where it's still alive and well.
Yeah, very much. I mean, you talked about the SQL user group that's held together over all this time and generations of members, right? Including people like me. But I'm struck, Bob, because it seemed like the common knowledge, right? These common user things like PC user groups talking about, hey, this is how you can format a disk. This is how you partition memory and do all those, right? Those things have kind of gone away maybe because the technology is a little easier. Yeah. But then you talked about models. I think about my uncle-in-law, I'll call him, that still leads, at the local public library, computing for seniors, right?
Yeah.
Particularly focuses on security, focuses on these are the ways that bad actors, right, attempt to take advantage of you. Oh, your grandson's in trouble. Oh, send me money, or we're going to cut off your lights. Those kinds of things. But they're not community. To your point, there's a dedicated person that leads it. There are people that participate, but those people, unlike the user groups that you talked about, and when I think about the SQL user group, the folks that are down here doing CompTIA in Summit County and some of these other folks, right, where they want to really exchange knowledge, where everybody's engaged in researching technology, applying it, and then sharing that knowledge.
Right.
And to your point as well, where you have a CSU that's gracious to share a locale, you'll maybe have for-profit entities, I'll call them, right? They're saying, hey, come here, and their logos and branding, they're all over the room to remind you that, hey, we sponsored this and we're part of your community, but you feel like they're ready to then give you an NDA and then a contract and have you sign on dotted line for the next year.
And
that's gone.
The interesting thing is, so you just brought up about 3 or 4 examples of how the models or the concept is still there.
Sure.
But they're all either they're survivors of the days gone by, like the SQL Group. SQL Group, by the way, is a group that meets monthly. We'll put a link in the comments in Northeast Ohio about database stuff. And they just did a SQL Saturday event about a month ago, which I was able to attend and you were not because you were out of town. That's the only reason I went. I first made sure you weren't going to be there.
There you go.
But there was about 100 people there with all sorts of sharing and educational events for database developers and the like. It was fantastic. It was great. And what you're talking about with your uncle-in-law, I'm going to have to remember that title, putting together something that is showing people about what not to click.
There you go.
Now, when you take a look at those two things, boy, are the audiences, they could not be more different.
No.
One is for seniors, you don't want to fall for, and the other ones are database professionals who are out there making a great living with these technologies, but they're both based around the idea of people are giving up their time to share knowledge and understanding that theoretically you could find that stuff online, but here you're finding it with someone who is an expert right there who is willing to share and willing to give value out of their knowledge and the like. And we're going to talk about some other ways that that's happening or that can move forward, but we're first going to take a break.
Don't let IT overwhelm you. Simplex-IT's Learning Center provides easy-to-understand answers to your most commonly asked IT questions. Our videos cover both technical and non-technical topics, everything from cybersecurity to cloud computing, managed services to co-managed services, and how easy it is to work with us, all so you can stay ahead of the game and maximize your IT. We have over 100 videos, so visit simplex-it.com today and look for our Learning Center. And not all videos have Bob in them.
Hey, what?
Simplify your complex IT with Simplex-IT.
And we're back. And by the way, Howard, you did not give a background.
I didn't give a background.
You did not give a background of yourself.
Born in Youngstown, Ohio. Great city, steel city, late 70s. Steel companies folded up, packed up, and left. I'm a high school kid and graduated from Youngstown State. Stumbled onto computing. Right in high school, we had a key punch and a math teacher that would teach Fortran.
Yeah.
Right, and you'd punch out your Fortran, they'd collect it all, send it downtown, run it on some machine. A week later, it would come back, and a TRS 80.
Yep.
That whole Radio Shack platform with the cassette player and all that.
Oh, yeah.
That's all we had in our high school there. And I ignored the whole thing. Didn't know anything about it. Was excited about cars, excited about whatever else, right? Watched this movie called War Games. You probably remember
Oh,
that.
yeah. Absolutely.
Kid with a computer in his room, launches World
Would
War
you like
III.
to play a game?
Yeah. Would you like to play a game?
Yeah.
I'm watching this movie, and I'm like, I did not know you could do that with this computer. I'm sitting in the theater thinking this. I'm in my second year at Youngstown State. I go back, that whatever that was, fall semester or quarters, I think we were on, and I says, hey, I want to study computers. I want to get out of this business thing, Business, we were there, on into the 80s. You had movies like Movie Driven here, right?
Yeah.
Wall Street and all this stuff. And it's like, yeah, study business, make all the money,
Right. Greed is
tear
good.
the whole world, the whole thing. Greed is good, right?
Yeah.
You can see my whole life was movies because you can get $1 movie down on Market Street of the place. But I said, I want to learn computers. They said, okay, great. Change your major, spend another year in school. It's like, this is expensive enough for me. Let me just minor in computer science and go there. But in 1985 in Youngstown, Ohio, at least Youngstown State at the time, so excuse me, Penguins, the computer science department, and we had a computer tech department, and the whole business school, they didn't really see the value of people studying computers and business at the same time. So I go to business school, and they said, look, you're wasting all your electives, like studying with those computer science guys. I was like, get out of here, come back and study with us. Computer science is like, well, you're not serious. We got some serious people coming up here. They want to learn how to write operating systems and all that. We don't need you because you're running around like whatever, masters of the universe kind of thing. Graduated. I said, if I can graduate, get a job, it won't matter what my degree was. It won't matter any of that stuff because I'll demonstrate I got experience in this space, and I'll be a tech guy.
Yeah.
And for the rest of my life, I've been trying to prove that I'm a tech guy. It's just a sickness in my head. I'm going to get over it and all that, right? Just trying to prove this because, I didn't come through, right, this whole computer science, structures, operating systems, data, right, that whole space. Yeah. I learned so much in that space. Came here, started working for the Ohio Bell telephone company. It was a thing back then, right? You actually had a phone. You pick it up, one ringy dingy, two ringy dingy. Yeah. In large systems, right? We had, we'd argue, the biggest data center in Ohio, right? 3 IBM water-cooled mainframes and an air-cooled Amdahl machine. And we spent all the money on IBM. They came in, taught us data center operations, principles of operations for MVS, principles of operation for OSVM, all this stuff, right? And head was just blown. But here comes these guys talking about PCs. Where do you learn about those?
Right.
User group, right?
Yep.
That catches us right up to where we are. That's exactly how I ran into you, and you and the community always had these spaces. We talked about the database group. I'd spent time in there because someone showed me a database one day, and I said, gee, this makes sense. This is how you organize stuff. This is how you tune this. Let me hang out with these folks. I was fortunate enough when I needed to find a job, database community came right through. It says, Howard, talk to these folks. Hey, talk to these folks.
Yeah.
Here you go. Like you said, this community, not more than just learning, social fellowship, and for many, this whole career-driven kind of thing. It's a beautiful thing, and I wonder, to your point, that internet, the other documentation, heck, Walden Books, Borders Books, right? You can remember when you can go there and find like all this content on computing and computers, right? Pushed all that away, but you still had these groups that still saw the value of assembling and hanging out as a group, hanging out as friends, but then, engaging in real discussions about, well, here's a new technology and this is coming brand new. And hey, I got some friends over here at this shop, and they're not sales guys. They're real technicians.
Right.
They're level 3 types. They'll come out and just talk to you because they're excited about their work and we want to hear it, right? And those kinds of things. I love that. And I love that this is still in space. I was just at the beginning of the month at the Ohio North Database Users Group. I was scratching my head for a bit because, this whole database thing has morphed into just something wild. You had a guy from these guys are going to kill me because I was watching this, the database platform that isn't. It's the web users love it anyway. You shove all this data in, not Splunk, but the other folks, right? And he's talking about approaching data and structures without relationships and tables and this whole thing. And I'm watching this and I'm like, yeah, absolutely. I'm sitting here trying to shove everything in a relational model because that's all I knew. Yeah. But look at how the industry's moved to a space where, you don't care about this, and all the structures you didn't matter, and where this data lives didn't matter, and how it was structured and the way you access it, right? The community is still growing, still expanding, and still providing value to regular folks here in the northeastern Ohio area.
Right.
Amazing.
And there's still people who will pop up and create, like Sarah Dukevich, who is constantly on the road, constantly putting together, the conferences and the ways for people to get together and to share this knowledge.
Right on.
And like we were saying earlier, in some cases, it is more of a pedestrian thing. It is more of an end user of just sharing examples, like with your, again, I'm going to say it, uncle-in-law. Uncle-in-law. I love it.
Uncle Edward Napoleon, good guy.
And in other cases, it's an online. It's other cases, it's whatever. But there are still opportunities for more of this stuff to be done. And some of the examples are they still have a long history. So, for example, CompTIA, which is the largest, and I'm one of their advisory boards, one of the largest non-vendor aligned IT groups around. They have a group called the AITP, the Association of IT Professionals, which used to be the Data Processing Management Association, which I used to be president of the Cleveland chapter back in the 80s. So that's a group. There's costs associated with that, but that's a group that still gets together, I think, in the Akron area.
They do. Yeah, Craig Purnell, I think, is one of the principals there.
Yep,
yeah.
I think Craig's still with it.
Yeah.
And then you also have a proliferation of a lot of STEM teaching, especially aimed at folks either from lower economic development areas and women and the like, where they're creating school coursework, or whether people can do it, either come in or they learn it online. But again, where they can create a bit of an environment, social or otherwise, where people can interact with each other, and to encourage more people to get into this technology business, because we need them. Absolutely. And it's interesting, your comment before about business and technology, because I remember back in right around 1980 or so, I actually interviewed for a job with Atari.
Nice.
And they flew me out to California, and this was back when they were starting to put out their home computers, the Atari 400 and 800. And I remember sitting down and interviewing with the guy who was in charge of all the software. Now, at this point, Atari was a giant. They were the video game people.
Yes, they were.
Absolutely no ifs, ands, or buts.
All the markets, yes.
And I remember talking to the guy who was in charge of software development, and I said, so what are the plans for Atari as far as businesses? And he said, oh, we have none. I said, you have none? He goes, oh, yeah, absolutely. These computers are useless when it comes to doing anything for business. These computers have no future doing any business. And I was like, okay, this was nice talking to you. And I've never, I don't think since then or before then, had a job interview where I so quickly lost interest. But it's interesting because when you talk about that expanse between business and technology.
Yeah.
What is that today? as far as what kids are learning, there's probably a similar kind of divide going on as far as what kids learn today versus what they're going to be faced with in 10, 20 years.
How interesting. I wish I had a good answer.
So do I, because
my daughter just came out of school, right? This whole whatever they are, right? This Gen Y or whatever they call this group, right?
I can't keep track of that.
And they hear these stories about, people starting, doing this whole startup thing and starting out with money, maybe maxing out a credit card or something like that, or getting some traction from some VCs or something like that, some funder, and then it turns into just magic, right?
Yeah.
And I wonder, here I go with my crotchety, I remember days, right, where, a lot of people were just out to solve a problem, right? They said, this is an issue and we can solve this problem and we can drive real value. And I wonder if we've forgotten some of the tenets of business, just like we've forgotten, the tenets of computing and secure computing and organization, like you talked about the large system people had, right? Or even starting Simplex-IT, right? And this whole thing of, hey, there's a need, I'll meet it, versus I bet you we can make a lot of money here and meet a need and then sell this thing and go to the next thing. I wonder if we've lost that discipline, right?
This is interesting because one of the things I want to do, and you may be back for a third on this.
Dude, you can't bring it back for a third time, man. Your audience, what are they going to say? It's like, get some more friends or something.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. But what I want to do, I want to bring people who are like 60, 40, and 20.
Ooh, nice.
For the standpoint of, because
very much, yes.
I remember when I was 20 years old and I was told about how horrible my generation of kids were. Because we didn't do this, that, or the other thing.
Yes.
And then I remember like 20 years later, the same thing. Yes. Every generation is the absolute worst generation ever.
You caught me. Yes. Yes. These sons of guns, no discipline. Look at you.
Absolutely. Not like when we... Oh, wait. But the reason I bring that up is because I remember back around the early aughts, or whatever we want to call it, right after 2000 or so.
Yeah.
You remember how there was a small recession? I mean, it didn't seem small at the time, but by comparison today, it was a dinky little recession.
There you go.
But the dot-com crash and all of that kind of fun stuff that happened. And I remember that there was a lot of people who were trying to start companies right around that.
Yes, they were.
And I remember with Jim Cookenham and it wasn't Cozy. There was an IT group that formed that was specifically about professional and business development. And going to a couple, and there were tons of people who were looking for investors because they had. But I think the interesting thing is, and this is what I think is different than today, they were much more focused on their idea and then the money. But the money was absolutely just as present as it was today, as far as what they wanted to do.
Oh yeah,
and because I did go to an investor group, whatever you want to call, entrepreneurial group that was in downtown Cleveland about a month or so ago. And I was by far the grandparent in the room. I mean, everybody was a kid, and they were like 18 to 20 or whatever. And when I talked to them, all of them were talking. They would talk very, very briefly about the concept, about what their service was. You could tell they put some thought into it.
Okay,
but they were much more into how their investment line was going to go. And I don't know whether that was as long as I got an idea, it doesn't matter how dumb it is, I got to go get the investors, or they've got the idea, but they think that all I want to hear about is that they've thought through the investment plan.
Interesting.
I don't know which way that goes. And I was too embarrassed to ask. Because these kids were so much, as someone who has started his own business, I have no clue whatsoever. And this is not an invitation for emails. I have no clue how to go after, or even if I want to, any kind of investment money or anything along those lines. But I kind of know, it's been 16 years, so I kind of know how to run a business.
Yeah.
Whereas these kids may not know how to run a business, but they sure as heck know the whole investment plan.
Absolutely.
And I don't see anything necessarily wrong with that or right with that, one way or the other, because it's a different world.
I'm with you. Yeah.
And let's face it, we talk about investment strategies and startup funds and the amount of people that are out there doing that. I mean, Shark Tank alone.
Yeah. Look at this.
So it is a different world than it was back then.
Yeah. And I imagine you're excited about growth and everything else. So I'm the first generation, I guess, non-entrepreneur in my family, right? Mm-hmm. So Dad ran a moving company in Youngstown, Ohio, and started it because he was tired. Like I said, Youngstown was a steel town, but frequent layoffs, downturns, that kind of thing, felt like you're out more than you're in, so took an early retirement and had this kind of side gig, I guess I'll call it, hauling. Back then you could haul refuse and trash and ash, right? And turned it into moving because you get more money hauling furniture. And his dad, my grandfather, used to haul coal, right? Because coal ran the houses, especially in the lower parts of Youngstown, Ohio. You'd haul coal in the winter and then pick up the ashes like in the summer and clear that whole thing out, right? And here I come, I'm excited about computing and computers, and you sit down at this keyboard and you type and you just do this kind of thing, right? Yeah. Totally foreign, right? But I look back at them and I say, I watch them and yeah, it wasn't easy, and it wasn't like, people are lining up the door like just throwing money, but it fed us, it put us through school and all those things, and fed my dad and his 4 brothers and sisters and all of that. And I wonder, if the market and other forces have just taught us to just, in the old days, I would think that people thought bring value and the earnings will come. And others think, well, bring a little something, and then here's the dollars, and this will turn into something that we can sell into the next thing, right? But those businesses in those days, you put your name on it and you grew it. And nowadays, it seems we put generic names on our businesses because we want to sell them, or we want to be in a position to sell them. Well, so I wonder.
Yeah, and that's one where is that something because that's just who we see.
That's what we see.
Versus what actually people are doing.
You
still get back to that whole, the high percentage of jobs or businesses that fail or the like. But it is interesting, but I would also say from the entrepreneurial standpoint, there's still that model where there are now a lot of these are driven by schools, but where the schools will have these groups that get together that talk about, let's share our knowledge about investments and startup strategies and the like, as well as there's actually some investment groups. I know John Carroll University, they have a pretty active group, but it's primarily run by investors.
Okay.
So, I mean this in nothing but the kindest way. They are as much bringing in potential companies to invest in, as well as kind of incubating them and the like. So there are these groups that are sort of starting up, and I've actually never really considered it. But if you look at like incubators, you look at some of the STEM groups, the education groups, you look at some of the holdover groups, such as the Sequel Group and the like. You look at some of the groups that are managed or supported by groups like CompTIA, or even some groups that are oriented towards manufacturing organizations like Magnet or Manufacturing Works or the like. So there are some, but they don't have a standard model. They're kind of all over the place.
I'm with you.
So that may be a good thing. It may be a bad thing. I don't know. But I get the feeling that we may, over the next couple of years, we may start seeing more of this stuff come back. The whole idea of let's create groups that just support each other from an IT and from a knowledge transfer standpoint.
Let's hope so. I think about some of my colleagues in the space that I'm in, and we're finding each other again, and we're sharing, and we're communicating just issues, just like you said, to just help each other. And this isn't for dollars or anything. It's just more for knowledge. And I'm part of InfraGard, right? This partnership between the FBI and business, right? And with the intent that we're sharing information to help, reduce threats and crime, in those spaces, right? And again, it's just more sharing, more engaging, right? So like you said, these communities are coming back post-COVID and through COVID, right? These communities are coming back because I think we see the value in sharing, and it's just not about me and my earnings and what I delivered this quarter. It's about, hey, I'm in this community and the community's better for all of us. I have this memory of you, and you tell me if it wasn't. But we talked about, with in terms of the internet, and you have all these users, people in all these residences you see around here, and everybody has, a router, a little device, and they have through their internet service provider access to this internet, right? Where nowadays you got bad actors that would take, weak devices and convert them for mischief and that kind of thing. Right. But again, we're all a part of this community as well. This community of, I guess I'll say, internet users. And the design has certainly gone into, being paid for service and the services you provide. But if we aren't looking out for each other, we turn this network into just blah. And so the same for our community, right? Yeah. If I want to grow in not only my understanding and experience, well, why not go to the community? Why not benefit from the community, and the community benefits from my participation, and we share and we give back. And that's what I've always seen from you, Bob. I mean, from the beginning to a fault, right? This whole service to community. And I think, it certainly blessed us, and most likely blessed you as well.
Absolutely. You get experience that you wouldn't otherwise have. You get opportunities to learn skills that you otherwise hadn't.
Absolutely.
That kind of fun stuff. So absolutely.
Yeah.
So cool. And I think with you saying something nice about me, I think that's a good place to wrap this up. Because I'm not going to say anything nice about you, because
you don't have to.
Oh, good. Because
I know how you feel. I see it all the time. God bless you.
No, dude, it's always great to talk to you.
Bob, thank you for the invite.
Yeah.
You're doing a good work here, and this is another example, man. Happy to be a guest here, and thanks for the privilege.
And you will be back for a third time. It's going to happen.
Sorry about that, you guys.
And with that, you know the details. This is a podcast, and by podcast, you are legally bound to click on likes, and you have to subscribe. I'm sorry if you haven't seen it, you really do. And you do have to put comments down, because if you don't do any of those three things, well, bad things happen. We don't want that. Until next time, Bob Coppage, BizTech Space.